Welcome to LA, everybody. How many of you are from out of town? Wow. Yes. We finally got the conference to come to LA, and we're so excited. I'm a part of the local chapter, and we want to really thank National for representing LA and letting us be a part of this, because this has been a long time coming for us. So thank you all for being here, and welcome. I'm going to have a series of questions for you, okay? So it's going to be a little bit of like call and response, at least at the beginning. How many of you are currently working in-house? Well, the majority. For those of you that did not raise your hands, we're going to have to ask you to leave. So, okay, I guess you can stay. You seem like a fun crowd. We're good. All right. I'm Sheharazad Fleming. I'm a creative director and a brand strategist. And I started my career here in LA 20 years ago, working at a lovely studio. So in-house wasn't always a part of my world. In fact, this is the lovely building that I started my career in. It's a historic building in a part of town called Culver City. It's an Art Deco building, and I sort of had the quintessential first job. Small studio, really nurturing, a lot of natural light and tall ceilings and creative offices converted, dogs. You know how it's always a cool space if there's dogs allowed, right? And I really got a chance to learn what it meant to run a design business, because I had a great mentor, Linda Warren, who ran the business, who's still running her business. She taught me a lot. She taught me a lot about what it takes to lead creatives and the care and love and the feeding that we all need as creatives, and that it's a very sort of special approach. And after 9 years of being in, really a great place, I went in-house, and this was my office. I mean, not literally in the dollar store, but just above it. And I could hear their piped in horrible music, and I have nothing against Mariah Carey, but I still can't really listen to her anymore because it was just on so much. I heard the public toilet, flushing every day, and it was so different. Everything was different. I had gone from being in this studio to being in-house. And let me preface this by saying I went in-house to work for my client in academia, which is like a triple whammy. And during that time, the only way I could describe how I felt was that I was kind of experiencing creative culture shock. I went from being amongst a group of nurturing creatives to being the sole creative. I went from a small environment to working for the largest private employer in Southern California. I went from brainstorming meetings where you spitball and you put the Post-its up and any idea is a worthy idea, to really structured meetings around a conference table at 5 o'clock on a Monday. It was weird. It was different. And I was really just trying to get my head around this whole thing and figure out what it took to build an in-house team, what my new role was, what it was that I needed to do. And just like most of you, when you start on a new endeavor, what do? You do your research, right? You start to, you read all the articles you can. I watched every webinar, and anything I could get my hands on to really understand what it was going to take for me to succeed in this new environment. And inevitably, every article, every webinar, every talk used. I'm sorry, could you hold your applause till the end? It's like they've never been to a presentation before. Inevitably, everything I read used this word: challenging. The challenges of in-house design, overcoming the challenges of in-house design, the hurdles of in-house design, culture, so challenging. Even in the comments, it was as though people were saying, I've been in this, I remember this one comment specifically. This guy said, I've been working in-house for 2 years, and I can't wait for a studio to come and save me. And it was like, I just imagined him being like, in this like floating raft, like out in the, like, please, studio, save me. But the thing was, I had come from a studio environment. And I knew that studios had their own obstacles. And I knew that every job has obstacles and challenges, right? So what was this whole thing about? I also felt that the word challenge, look, everybody loves a good challenge, right? Overcoming a challenge is a part of growth. So it's not to say that challenge is always a negative thing. In fact, we all stand up to a good challenge every now and again. But in this context, the word just continually felt less than, negative, desperate, hopeless. And I didn't feel any of those things. I didn't feel desperate. I didn't feel hopeless. I didn't feel like I was settling by taking this job. It's true, I wasn't thrilled about the new office, but I can overlook that. I got some good deals at the dollar store. I can, there's perks. So I'm here 20 years into my career, half of which was spent in a studio setting and half of which was spent in-house, to tell you that what I've learned is that working in-house is about this word, opportunity. In 2010, I started working for this university, USC. They've been in the headlines a lot recently. Oh, please, yes, everybody. Let's just throw out UCLA, Bowling Green. Okay, Michael. So I started working for USC in 2010, and I'm in my office, my fancy dollar store office, and a guy from facilities comes in and says, hey, just so you know, next door, there's this supply closet. We're cleaning it out. You're going to hear a lot of noise. He didn't know who the heck I was and that I was brand new. He's like, so if you've got any stuff in there that you need, can you get it out? We're going to start working on it tomorrow. And I'm like, sure, because I'm kind of curious and trolly. I'm like, yeah, I got stuff in there. Leave it open. So I went just to have a look and see what the heck was in the closet. And also because I wanted to see, was it the same size as my office? Could I expand potentially? Opportunity, right? So I get into this closet, and it's all the stuff that you'd expect, a bunch of crap. Some old merch with logos from the 70s and stuff like that. Some of it I kept, most of it I trashed. But I uncovered one box, and at the top sat this photo, just right on top. How many of you know who this man is? Throw it out. That is Sal Bass, a great designer, Sal Bass. And there he is in his studio holding USC's graphic design manual that he worked on in 1994. And I was immediately intrigued. So I'm digging through this box, and I uncover a binder about this thick, and it's full of correspondence from Sal Bass, his associates, and the leadership at the university. Now, keep in mind, this is the early 90s, so it was sort of before everybody was using email. So a lot of faxes, a lot of typed up correspondence, everything chronological order. Somebody had gone through the trouble of hole punching and putting it all together, and I devoured it all. I sat in that room as though I had just uncovered a treasure, like it was meant for me. And I read every page, and one page in particular that I found was really interesting was Sal Bass's office was faxing Pantone saying, per our discussion, you're going to change the tone of this color because we're not that into it. And I'm like, can you just do that? You just send Pantone a fax and be like, Yeah, you know, that tone's not really working for me. Let me know when you get it right. The reason I share this with you is that as I sat there with that box, I knew that I had just landed on something that was going to help me in my first project, and that was redesigning the identity system that Sal Bass had worked on. This is the identity system that he created in 1994, and I now had all this knowledge and understanding of how it came to be 18 months worth of correspondence back and forth from the beginning of the project to the end. I knew why they chose the school colors that they did. I knew why they went from red to crimson to cardinal. And all of this information probably mattered to no one but me. I also knew that when USC was my client and I was a consultant, I would have never had that access. The opportunity to have this unbound access had sort of come to me in the form of this physical box, but metaphorically, it told me something else. Sal Bass designed the system in 1994, and I don't think he ever intended for it to look like this by 2010. So I use the term system loosely here, because I don't know if you can see a system, because I certainly can't. And I used this slide, the knowledge that I had from that box, and the opportunity that I felt I had before me to put together a scope of work, a budget plan, and a timeline. And I sent it up the chain. I felt if Sal Bass can do it in 18 months in the 90s, it was fair for us to try to do it in 12 months in 2010. My administration came back and gave me 4. Keep in mind, I've been in this job for less than a month. I have no team. I have a budget, and I have other things that I've had approved, but I certainly can't do this by myself. This is opportunity number 2. I decided that this was my moment to seek out my design heroes. I use this as an opportunity to work with Pentagram. I had always admired their work. I knew that they certainly had the portfolio to do what I needed and to help me. I also knew that it was my opportunity to learn and to work with my design heroes. And I specifically wanted to work with this guy here, DJ Stout, who is the partner at Pentagram in Austin. This is a photo of DJ when he found out we'd be working together. I don't know if you've ever seen a grown man cry, but it's not pretty. What DJ taught me was that an identity was the first step to building a brand and setting a bar. So, we remember what the identity had devolved into. And what DJ and his team, DJ, Julie Savasky, and their team, did was to redesign the identity system to look like this. It worked on mobile, it was consistent, it was readable, it made sense. But it was a huge, huge shift for the university. And I was definitely walking to my car at night with friends because I was not popular. We redesigned the identity system from this to this. For the next 9 years, this identity became my #1 project, implementation. It's impossible to show in 20 minutes the amount of time and touch points that came through this project. It had to span 22 academic units or schools, 15 countries, 80 satellite offices, 80,000 employees, and I won't even get into the students. So This is just a sampling of all the different ways that this identity had to operate, from billboards to wine bottles. Implementing a brand, as I said, allows you to set a bar. USC has a publication that they call USC Trojan Family Magazine, and this is what it looked like prior to the rebrand. Working with Pentagram, this is what the magazine started to look like after. Working with DJ, I was able to understand what it meant to be an art director, what it meant to take a very similar story. These are very similar stories about, a very accomplished person. The story on the left is about a Nobel Prize winner. Visually, they look very different. Stories that went from looking like this, nothing wrong with this, right? But we've all seen this conference room shot before. Or this, the heart patient. USC has a huge medical enterprise. Heart patient, lovely, so cute. I love dogs. But we've seen this before. Stories went from looking like this to this, using conceptual illustration, getting people to actually want to read about health matters versus seeing the doctor and the device and the patient. This magazine goes to 300,000 print subscribers and 250,000 digital subscribers. It's the largest circulation of a university publication in the nation. It was important to focus on this because it would set the bar for all of the other schools within the university that have magazines and all of the other offices that are doing work who will receive this. This is, again, another health-related story. It's a story on obesity. We flipped it on its head. Instead of showing the physician, the patient, we showed junk food. This bright, bright, bright junk food, so that as you're reading and you're understanding what it is that sugars and fats do to your body, you're almost getting kind of physically sick, Does that kind of have a dark side? Stories on profiles went from straight up portraits to mixed media and collage. We started to mine for stories that dovetailed with our own interests. This is a fine artist who graduated from USC but got his bachelor's degree in biology. I went to his art gallery opening and spoke with him and found out that he was a graduate. And I was immediately like, oh, story. So what he does is he harvests flies, house flies. He takes what he learned from his biology degree, and he feeds them this sugar paint that's harmless. And every time a fly lands, it regurgitates. So what you're seeing is him standing in front of one of the canvases that these flies that he's harvested have created. It's fascinating. So we did a story on him, and we really freaked people out with our GIFs. Because like I said, I have a dark side, right? But those performed really well on social media, and this was a huge shift for USC. This is probably as far as I could really push things, but nonetheless, it was the opportunity to push things. Which brings us to where I am today. This is now where my office is, so things are looking up. When I found out that I was going to get to work in this building, I was actually pretty excited because I knew it, and I knew about its pedigree. This building was originally designed by Elliott Noyes, modernist architect for IBM, as LA's aerospace campus. And he designed it based off of the idea of the punch card. So you can see, I guess it won't go back, but anyway, you can see that it goes from the punch card to the building to Otis's logo. All of these things have sort of informed each other. So I was super excited that I was going to have the opportunity to be there. And I don't know if you guys know the story, but in a nutshell, Thomas Watson hired Elliott Noyes, who then hired Paul Rand and Eero Saarinen and Charles and Ray Eames. But I don't know if you know these three guys. How many of you know these three guys? One person. This was the in-house design team at IBM. Over 9 years, these guys worked in-house on a number of incredible pieces. I highly recommend that you look into this, but this is just a series that I found interesting. It's a poster series that they did for employees. And when it started out, people were like, well, this is really kind of out there. But by the end of the 10 years, it had a life of its own. People loved it. It set the bar. And what it did for me was it inspired me. Being in-house gives you the opportunity to inspire. And it's about an evolution, not a revolution. It took me 9 years to get USC's brand to the point that I felt that it could really stand on its own without falling apart and degrading like it had in the past. It took the guys at IBM 9 years to get that poster campaign going. And 45 years later, I came across it and it inspired me. The opportunity is there. The change you garner in-house can have a lasting impact. In-house, the very term in-house is fundamentally inclusive, right? Every group needs a leader. Being in-house is about leadership. I read this quote recently because I'm still doing my research. I'm still reading and trying to devour, and I would like to say that I do think that the conversation is changing a little. It is shifting. I want to leave you with this quote, which says, "The decision to lead is the point of origin for every great thing that has ever existed. You only discover what you're truly capable of as your influence scales." And I highly recommend this book, Herding Tigers by Todd Henry. I would like to see us, we're all branding professionals. I know it's not all sunshine and lollipops, although it did kind of seem like it was at Warby Parker, I'm just saying. I would like us all to start changing our own perspective about what it means to be in-house. We need to rebrand in-house design culture from the challenges of in-house to the opportunities. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So, sounds like you were doing a lot of organizational and cultural shifts.
Yeah.
When you brought up these discussions to business leaders, how did you quantify what you were trying to do? What were those targeted results, and how did you measure that?
Sure, that's a great question. Did everyone hear it? Oh, no, that's okay. She was saying, how do you talk to leadership, and how do you quantify these changes? And did I get that right? I'm kind of summarizing. So 2 ways. I think I was in a position where there was so much room for improvement that there was no real other option than to change. So I had approval and buy-in from the top. One of the terms of me going in-house and working for my client was that I would be working on their rebrand. So I kind of had a little bit of those conversations up front. And so I knew that I had the buy-in. And academia tends to be a little bit top-down. So it's a little bit like, if our administration wants it and this is a new time for us, this is what we're going to do. And you're either going to be on board or you're not. I also think that there was, like I'm saying, so much room for improvement that I also had this built-in trust. I had worked with so many different groups around the university already that a lot of the times that I was going in and doing a pitch or that I was doing a training, I had already spoken to these people one-on-one, and it may have even been on something as small as a postcard campaign. You know, we'd been hired, the studio had been hired for, you know, a small project, but because I had worked with them and I had collaborated with them, there was this built-in trust. And I used that to my advantage because I had to. And at the end of the day, the reality was that I also knew that I was doing the right thing. I was doing the right thing for the school. I was doing it the best way I knew how, and I was really giving it everything I had. So there's so much to be said for being able to walk into a meeting knowing all of that, right? In terms of true like numbers, return on investment, that sort of thing, the reality was that the university was about to launch the largest fundraising campaign in the history of higher education. And every group within the university was going to have to invest in one form or another towards this. So it was, in a way, the perfect time to do it. Come out with your new materials, launch this fundraising campaign, new identity.
Hi, what I want to know is how did you control the brand once you started this?
Whips, chains. Great question. The first thing that we did was we started out by doing literally like a training tour. You know, we were talking about this today. I think I did 20 within the first month of the launch, which meant that I was segmenting out groups. So whether they were communications individuals within the various academic units. So for example, the head, director of communications and marketing for the architecture school and all the different schools. That was one subset. Talk to them, talk to our vendors, talk to our purchasing department. So meet with the medical enterprise. So the first thing was just training. The second part was guidelines. Like we put together a real comprehensive book that was, also a binder, looked very, very academic. And it was this thick. And we sent that out to everybody. We printed as many as we could and made sure everybody had them. And we also kept them at our offices. So anytime that somebody was like, I didn't know about this, my grandson created this great logo. You're so mean, lady. I would be like, no, let's meet. And then, present this binder and this is what we're doing and really just tell the story. And keep explaining why it's important. And it's not about their grandson's logo not being good or bad, but that it just wasn't a part, it was not a part of these guidelines, which were really important. In that slide that you guys saw that showed how it degraded, at first when I would show that slide in this kind of environment to internal constituents, they were like, yeah, what's the big deal? We all want to look different. But by year 8, as new people were coming into the university who had never seen that slide, I would show it, and there would be a gasp. They'd be like, oh, So I knew that we were affecting change. And then we kept the guidelines online and just so that as they evolved and as we kind of found oh, we didn't think about this, because there was tons of, you can't think through everything in 4 months for a university of that size. So we would be like, oh yeah, so there's this institution that's within a subset of a subset of a subgroup, and and they just got a naming gift and all that. So we'd figure it out, and then we would put those guidelines, we'd update them on the website. And then we also had just quarterly, what we called communications council meetings, where we would present all these updates and really just have an open dialogue with anybody who wanted to come. And they went from angry and annoyed at this whole thing to, really collaborative and, really people getting on board and seeing that it was having a positive effect.